you'll see my serious side and my silly side playing the old church organ. I started off piano, but didn't like that. But I started off playing at Gramphone, and after a few years, I went to the Cathedral of Bury St Edmunds out of Harrison Oxley, and he sort of knocked the rough edges off me and put me right. And after I'd been going there for 3 or 4 years, when I left school, I threw me out like I do when you get to 15, and I started going around different churches when somebody was on holiday. And as I told you in my tape a little while ago how I finished up at Harlers, that weren't about a week later, the parson knocked on the door at Cavendish and said he was in the middle, could I come and help him out? I said, yes, I'll come and help you out, and I've been here 47 years, man and boy, and enjoyed every minute of it. We've had a wonderful time, and we go across the pub and have a pint out of choir practice, sometimes 2 or 3, sometimes out of even song. We pick the hymns for the month in the pub, and there's a big sign used to be over the pub door in the Plumber's Arms at Denson that beer is proof that Jesus loves us and wants us to be happy. And when you're poaching, don't forget the old saying, trust in the Lord and keep your gunpowder dry. There used to be an old boy living in Glamstead called Pussy Moisen. He used to work on the land all his life. He used to love a drink, and many a day he never went to work on Mondays. When we was on the farm doing a harvest up there once, he never used to come in early on a Mondays because he always had a big hangover. I remember he coming up there one Tuesday, and old good child the farmer said, you can just go home, Moisen. He said, you didn't come Monday. I don't want you to come today. You can go home. So Percy went home. He never come back from all Thursday. And good child say, where was you Wednesday? Moisen said, he didn't want me Tuesday, so I thought, bugger it, I ain't come Wednesday neither. I'm here this morning. But in the cherry tree one night, Percy was sitting there, and he never used to wear his wedding ring on his finger. He always wore it with his neckerchief through it, round his neck. And he had no trilby, if you can think of it, and a big old moustache. He looked a bit like Corporal Jones out of Buddy Dad's army. And an overcoat. I always wore his overcoat, summer and winter. He always used to reckon what keep a cold out, keep a heat out. But anyway, I was in a cherry tree one night, and Percy always used to drink farm stouts. And there was a yank and a bit of stuff coming there, which was unusual. And the yank went up to the bar, the bit of stuff went and sat down. And he said to the bit of stuff, what do you want, love, gold or silver? She said, I'll have a gold, honey. So he said to the landlady, 2 whiskies, please, and went and sat down. Percy still drinking his farm stout. Got up again. What do you want, love, gold or silver? She said, I'll have another gold, honey. So 2 more whiskies, please, landlord. Went and sat down. Percy went and got himself another farm stout and sat down. A few minutes later, the yank saying, what do you want, love, gold or silver? She said, I think I'll have a silver this time, honey. So he walked up to the bar, he said 2 gin and tonics. Got 2 gin and tonics, went and sat down. Percy still there. He said to the landlady, Percy say, you ain't seen my old woman die, have you, Doris? She say, no, why ain't you? He say, well, not since breakfast. He say, we had a hell of a bloody argument. He say, I'll come out the house, I ain't seen her since. Anyway, he hadn't said it about a minute, and in walked Percy's missus, if you can imagine, a little short woman with a black overcoat on, a big handbag. All of a sudden, Percy say, what do you want, love, gold or silver? She say, arseholes. Percy say, give her a small brown, Doris. And the whole pub, including the yank, just cracked up, and nobody could drink anything for a minute or 2. They had to go to the bloody toilet. But that was Percy. But I can remember he used to, up the farm one day, Percy was sitting on the tractor. He was off down the field with a bowser, and good child said to him, Moisen, he said, bloody smoking on the tractor. Well, she answered for the bloody water bowser shower. And that's how he used to talk. And he said to good child, they had an argument once about money. And Percy say to good child, do you know, he say, in a few years' time, I'm going to be as big a landowner as you, good child. And good child say, whatever you talking about, Moisen, going to be the biggest landowner than me. He said, I've got all these acres up here, he said, all this land and these big houses, and you're going to be... He say, I shall have a plot 6'6" deep, 6 foot long, just the bloody same as what you are, so I'm going to be a bigger landowner as you in a few years' time. When we knocked about down Bumpstead Hall, the poolies used to go to Eton, and there was another boy went to Eton with him called Edward Oates. He was either the grandson or the great-grandson of Titus Oates, what went to the Arctic. I used to live at Guessingthorpe, but when Oates he knocked about with us, he used to live at Leston Hall with his father. And when we first got to know him, we was on the piss, and he was coming into a lot of money when he was 25. But before that, a couple of years before that, he got a job with us on Biggs Wall, laying the gas lines at Aldeburgh. And he used to come in the van with his... And he always had a silver top flask in his inside pocket, and in the van cold mornings, old Vaughan used to say, you've got the old flask on there, Eddie? And he used to have a swig of brandy and pass it round and things like this. And so of the nights we started to go on the booze. He used to come round the pubs round Glamsford. He could drink a pint of beer, he could sort of pick it up with his teeth. Anyway, one night in the Prince of Wales, we was in there on the booze, and who should come in was Roy Porter. And Roy is a well-known drinker. He could down a pint or two very quick. And he said to Oatesy, he said, you're the bloke what was on the television, drinking them pints. You could pick 'em up and drink it in 2.5 seconds. He said, yes. He said, I reckon I could beat you. So Oatesy said, well, you better set 'em up on this bar. So they set 2 pints up on the bar, and they had a bloke here sort of going 3, 2, 1, go. Anyway, are you ready? Yes, we're ready. 3, 2, 1, go. And Oatesy picked these up with his teeth, decked it, and put the pint mug down before Porter had got about a ½ inch out the top. So Porter said to him, well, we'll have to do that again, we weren't ready. So they set them up again. So they went 3, 2, 1 again, picked the pints up. Oatesy downed his and put it down, and Porter had only got about that much. He was getting better. Anyway, they set them up again, and Oatesy done it 3 times. But for the 3rd time, Porter weren't too far behind him. But I'd never seen anybody drink like Oates. He could do it after he'd had a skinful all night. And one day on Biggs Wall up at Aldeburgh, he say, I've been invited, he said, to a private shoot at Bumpstead Hall tomorrow morning. This was the Friday. On Saturday, he said, you can't give me a lift, can you? Because he hadn't got a car, Oatesy. So I say, yeah, I'll come and pick you up. I've got an old console, old rusty thing. I said, what time do you want picking up? He said, about 9:30. He said, they're meeting outside Bumpstead Hall at 10. So anyway, he got off the van at Friday tea time, and then anyway, on the Friday night, he happened to walk into Prince of Wales. Anyway, we'd had a good old skinful in there the Friday night, and there weren't so much drink driving about then. I took Oatesy back to Melford. He said, well, he picked me up. I said, yes, I ain't forgot you, I'll pick you up in the morning. Well, there used to be a chemist shop opposite the Bull in that time of day in Long Melford. As I was going up the street to pick Oatesy up, I see this bloke coming the other way with a trilby and a couple of belts of cartridges round his stomach and a 12-bore under his arm. Anyway, I turned round and hooted him, and he got in, and he gave me this chauffeur's hat. He said, you'll have to wear this hat. He said, Bullock, he said, that looked bad, me going down there sitting in the front. He said, I said, well, he said, stop at the chemist, I need some pills. He said, I've got a terrible hangover. Anyway, give me this chauffeur's hat, goes in and get the pills. He come out, gets in the back of the car this time. He said, that look better if I'm in the back. Anyway, we was a bit on the drag. And down the drive at Bumpstead Hall was about a ½ a mile down there, 1/4 mile, and I come flying down there in my old console, all the dust flying up behind it, and there was about 100 people all lined up on the lawn opposite the hall. And I went roaring out the front of them. There was Rolls Royces stood there and Jags. So I come roaring around the front in my old console and stopped right in front of the crowd of people there. and I opened the back door and I shouted, "Lord Oates of Liston," and he fell right out the car onto the track in front of the bloody hall. His old 12 ball went dink on the floor and they all went, "Oh dear, it's terrible." And I picked him up and knocked the dust off and gave me chauffeur's hat. What he gave me, "I must get a drink." He said, "Go and hold my gun, my man, I must get a drink." And he went in the hall and got a drink, and while I stood outside, I come by and give me a shooting number. But that was funny, that was, when he fell out the bloody car. Yeah. They had a big advertisement in the Suffolk Free Press one week, a few years ago, and that said steak and all the trimmings and a pint of Abbott. I think that was £3 or something then, 3 or 4 quid. But if you had the steak and all the trimmings and drank a pint of Abbott, you could drink as much Abbott as you wanted for nothing. Anyway, there was a trawlerman, a couple of trawlermen went in there and for last stuff. And I think one of the trawlermen drank 14 pints, so they didn't make a lot of money out of he. Anyway, old Roy heard about this, and not to be outdone, he went to Melford, got in the scutches, had his steak and all the trimmings and his pint of Abbott for nothing, and he started drinking Abbott. I don't know how many he had, but he had a bloody lot. And anyway, we were all sitting in the cock this night, and all of a sudden the front door opened, because that's right on the road, and he's about 2 steps down, and he come in like an exocet missile, head first, right onto the ground, bonk. And they all went and picked him up. "Where you been? Where you been?" He said, "I've only been down the scutches and had the steak and chips and all the trimmings and a pint of Abbott." He said, "I don't know how many I had." I played for a wedding once at Cavendish Chapel about 10 years ago. Might have been about 10 years ago. Anyway, there was a Scotchman getting married, got all his kilt on and all his regalia, and the best man to see him. Anyway, I started playing about half hour before the service, and halfway through I struck up with "I Belong to Glasgow," and they were all sitting in the congregation. Anyway, I stopped when I'd finished it. I said, "Now, we're all going to sing it this time," and I struck up with it again, and they all started singing "I Belong to Glasgow." Went through anyway. They had the wedding. At the finish of the wedding, they all went out for photographs. And I stood there talking to one or two of the hierarchy, the parsons and that round the organ. All of a sudden, the door opened and there was an old boy lived in Clare called Bernie Copsey. He had round glasses and they were right thick like jam jars. He come walking in, he'd like a pint, and he'd got a fag in one end and a cigarette lighter in another. And he looked round, he see me standing there, so he made a beeline for me. And he come up to the organ, he say, "Bullock," he say, "ain't the toilets around here?" He say, "I had about 5 or 6 pints before I come in the wedding." He say, "I'm fit to bust." Before I could say anything, the parson said, "Yes, yes, my man," he said, "we've just had new toilets, new kitchen fitted through the door there. Go and help yourself." So he goes off. He hadn't lit the fag and the lighter, and you could hear Bernie pissing in the toilet out the back. Anyway, he come out, and he come back to where I was, and I said to the parson, I said, "We witnessed a miracle in here today." So the parson said, "What do you mean, a miracle?" I said, "Well, you know you talked to the bride and groom about the wedding at Cana in Galilee, where Jesus changed the water into wine. I said, Bernie Copsey here has changed the wine back into water. This is a miracle." I said, "There's no need for people to go to Lourdes or Walsingham anymore." I said, "We've witnessed a miracle in Cavendish Chapel." I said, "You'll be having busloads come here, visitors." And Bernie was just going to say, "You silly old," and he remembered where he was. And I started to crack up a laughing, and the parson never cracked. We had to go outside. But from now on, I done this, told old Anglia Television this. I said, "They now call the chapel in Cavendish St Bernard's, the Bernie Copsey, because we witnessed this miracle in there." And that's the only miracle I've ever seen in Cavendish. But I remember standing in the porch at Cavendish Church one day, and there was a funeral on the Wednesday. This was a Sunday dinner time, and the old parson said, "We've got a funeral here, Rodney," he say, "Wednesday." He said, and I don't know what hymns we ought to have. He said he was a big Legion man, you know. I think we ought to have the Battle Hymn of the Republic. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He says, as a matter of fact, he said, that was Churchill's favourite hymn, and the choirmaster stood there with me. I said, yes, I said, because Churchill was unique, you know. He said, unique? He said, what do you mean unique? I said, well, he was the last white man in this country ever to be called Winston. And me and the choirmaster cracked up and had to walk out. I went, okay, go. And when the Battle Hymn of the Republic was being played, they got the choir there, and the probation officer in the choir from Sudbury, he used to be in the choir then, and he was a real good bass, and he was in behind me playing organ, singing, mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. Anyway, when they got to the third verse, I started up the third verse, and I sat on the organ, and I said, they scraped him off the tarmac like a dollop of strawberry jam, and I could see in the mirror the probation officer thought he was on the wrong verse, and he stopped singing and he was looking at the book to see what it did me, and I was singing the funny version to the hymn instead of the right one. We had a young parson come to Cavendish about 15 years ago called Burkett, and he couldn't drink, and we always picked the hymns, me and the choirmaster, once a month in the barrels at Cavendish, which is a right and proper thing to do. Because I'd always say in the Bible you should thirst after righteousness, and that was that me, you know, the church, you should go in the pub. Because my old chap used to tell me you should never play an organ in the church unless there's a pub next door. I say, oh, I got to Cavendish. But anyway, he used to come up there and have a pint, then he got to two, then after a few months he could drink free, always had a cigar. Anyway, his missus, we phoned his missus up one day, it was his 40th birthday. Said, it's all right, we come and pick Richard up, take him for drink for his birthday, me and the choirmaster. Oh yes, he said, I'll be glad to get him out the house. She said, we got a surprise birthday party for him. So anyway, we go pick him up. Come on, Richard, we're going for a drink. Oh, he was right pleased because the missus said he'd go. Anyway, we took him in the barrels. He ate 3 pints and a couple of gins, and he was absolutely arseholed. I daren't take him back. The choirmaster took him back to the door, and he knocked the door. When they opened the door, when he went in, he was pissed as a fire. When he went in, they flicked all the lights on, and there was all these people there shouting, happy birthday, Richard. And he was so pissed, he landed on the couch and went to sleep. And that was the finish of his bloody birthday party. And oh, he was wonderful, he was. But there used to be an old parson in Clare, what was better than that, old David Wardrop. He used to love a drink. We used to have to go down there sometimes to pick the hymns once a month, and he used to come in, he used to say, let's get our priorities right, boys, he said. He used to love a drink. We used to have to go down there sometimes to pick the hymns once a month, and he used to come in, he used to say, let's get our priorities right, boys, he said. And he used to come in with a tray with a bottle of gin, a bottle of whiskey and a big bottle of tonic. And me and the choirmaster Wardrop used to get stuck into this, picking the hymns. And called many a night. I finished up one night lying on the path outside the house. And 2 people come by and they had to knock the door and carry me in. And the missus say, whatever's happened? I said, well, only been hymn picking. But we used to go carol singing along old Seabrook and them. They were wonderful, wonderful days. We went every year, and they used to do Bumpstead one night, Hartest the next, then Somerton, and we used to have some laughs doing that. I remember going up to Somerton Road once. It must have been 30 on us, all pulled up outside this big house up there, and there was a couple of pufters lived there. Anyway, Seabrook say, what are we going to give 'em, boys? So we said, I reckon we ought to sing that song, We Three Kings, We Three Queers of Somerton, one on a bicycle, 2 in a car. Seabrook say, do you reckon we dare? I say, yeah. Anyway, we struck up with it. We three queers of Somerton, 1 on a bicycle, 2 in a car. All of a sudden the door opened and this bloke put his head out with his hand, and he got a £10 note, and he said to Seabrook, he said, if I give you £10, will you fuck off? So thank you very much. And when we finished up in Somerton, the lights were all on in this bungalow, and we were singing a couple of carols, and nobody come to the door. So Seabrook say, I don't know what's the matter, and somebody at the front say, well, she ain't going to hear us. She's deaf. So I say, will somebody at the back fart? She'll smell us. Then she'll open the bloody door. But this used to go on. We used to go to the Bumpstead Hall and get singing the carols in there, and I used to get the whiskey bottle out, and we used to get drunk. I remember going up the Somerton Road one day. There was about 10 on us in cars, or 10 cars, and there was a squad car come other way, and he pulled in the side so we could keep going. If he'd have stopped a lot on us, we'd have all finished up in Barry bloody neck that night, because we was all pissed. When we were grave digging, we had a wonderful time grave digging. I used to like that anyway. I dug a grave in Melford one morning, and I got home and the phone rang, and that was old Parker, the undertaker from Sudbury. He said, Roddy, he said, I want you to dig a grave for me in Little Corner Churchyard, he said, tomorrow morning for funeral in the afternoon. I said, I can't do it. He said, why not? I said, well, I've just dug one in Melford. I said, I got a backfill at 12 o'clock. He said, well, my funeral's not till 2:30. He said, you can do that for me, I'm in a medal. So I said, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I said, I can't do it on my own. That was only a single, got to go down about 5 foot. I say, I'll ring old Chambo and see if he'll give me a hand. So I rang Chambo. He said, I'll split you down the middle with a 2 on him. He said, yeah, I'll give you a hand. So I phoned Parker back and told him I'd do it. So he said, how much are you going to charge? Well, we was getting about 55 quid a grave in. I said, £80. £80? He said, I'm not paying you £80. I said, all right, you dig it yourself. Oh, no, he said, I can't dig it. He said, you'll have to do it. He said, but that's a load of shit you're giving me. £80, that's a load of shit. So anyway, me and Chambers went to Little Corner, dug the grave, back to Melford, backfilled the one in Melford, back to Sudbury, picked up the grass mats from Parker. He was still on about this £80 was a load of shit. We went up the churchyard in Little Corner, put the grass mats all round and everything, and these undertakers always have a little box with a little bit of mould dirt in, which you put in. And so when he says earth to earth, the parson, dust to dust, ash to ashes, they spring it on the coffin. Anyway, me and Chambers stood there in the churchyard. All of a sudden, this great dog come running in the churchyard, and that come running towards us, got the hackles up. Chambers said, "It's going to bloody bite us." He said, "Don't bite me with this shovel." Anyway, went right by us, didn't take the notice, and that went and done a shit on a grave about 4 down, and off that went out the churchyard. I said to Chamber, we stood watching this. I said, we'll give her a bit of shit today. He said, what are you going to do? Anyway, I got this dog's turd, emptied the mould dust out, put it in the box and put some mould dust on the top. By this time, we was in utter hilarity, me and Chambo. Put it on the grass mat, ready for the funeral. We went through the hitch and sat in the van, and Chambo kept on about this. Well, it got worse. I sat there nearly pissed myself for laughing. Anyway, all of a sudden, out the church, come the parson, with Mr. Parker in the front with his trilby and his handkerchief. He looked like something out of bloody Dickens. I always looked as though that was his nearest and dearest every one. Anyway, and the coffin, they come back down to the grave, put the coffin on, and they lifted and they lowered the coffin in the grave. But this time, me and Chambers was in utter chaos. All of a sudden, the parson said, earth to earth, and Parker took the top off, dust to dust, and he took it off and he went, and that went down. And when they went, he was shaking hands with all the mourners. Me and Chambers were laughing so much I started farting at the same time. And when we went back in with the grass mats, well, you never heard nothing like it. God, he did play up. And he said he was never ever going to mention shit again when we asked for money. I said no, and that, but he used to make me laugh, Parker. And one day we went there, took the grass mats back, to get the money, he had the bank building up at cornered. And when we went, the back door was open, we walked in, and there was 3 coffins there. One had got a body in, and 2 were empty, and they were on low stilts. So I shouted Parker, there was no answer. Chambo says, unusual for he'd leave the bloody back door open. Nobody about. Anyway, went to go out the back door, and Parker had been up the shop, a couple of 3 doors up, to get a packet of fags. See him coming out the shop. I said to Chambo, get behind the door. He said, what you want to do? Anyway, I got in the coffin, lay there. I'd got a fag on, and you could hear Parker's footsteps getting nearer and nearer and nearer. And he come in the door, and I got right up at the coffin. I said, I've come for me money. And you could see the blood drain out his head. He went completely white from red in about 5 seconds, and he never left the back door open no more. That was the finish of Parker leaving the back door open. Whenever you dug a grave, we used to dig them all by hand, and your right foot, what was always on the fork or the spade or the shovel when you put it in, the shoe on your right foot, after a while, it always crack across the bottom where that had been on the metal. So anyway, I had a funeral once and went down, that was Brown and Finn's. I used to be in Acton Square at Sudbury, they ain't there anymore now. And I went walking in there one day to get the grass mats to take them back to the grave I'd dug in a couple of villages away. And I said to the bloke in there, I said, I don't know, I say, this job is costing me a fortune. He said, what do you mean a fortune? I say, look, another pair of bloody shoes cracked right across the bottom. He said, what size are you? I say, 9. He say, hold on a minute. He say, come here. And there was a bloke lying in the coffin. And he got these shoes on. And I reckon if you bought them today, they'd cost you £150. They were solid leather. And he took one off. He said to me, you try that shoe on. So I put my foot in the shoe. I said, good hell, George. I say, fit me like a glove. I say, but no 2 feet the same. So he took the other one off, and I put that one on. I walked round the coffin. I said, Juddy, how George? I say, a lovely pair of shoes these are. So he put my shoes on he, and the bloke was there, and he'd got a watch. I said, want to know the time of the funeral, George? He said, God, how? He said, you ain't having a bloody watch. He said, when you go up there to backfill that grave, he said, for God's sake, don't come walking down there with them bloody shoes on. He say, in case there's 1 or 2 mourners still hanging about, he say, make sure you put your bloody old Wellington boots on. Now, we done another funeral once, dug his grave, and after the funeral, the coffin, we went back to backfill the coffin, and the old boy was a top gardener, and on top of the coffin laid this fork. And that was a fantastic fork. I don't know how much he paid. And I looked at Chambo and he looked at me. I say, what the hell, Chambo? I say, his bloody fork is better than the one we got. So I put my fork on top of the coffin and kept his. And that was a bloody good fork. And about a week later, there was another grave in Gramphone. They were burying an ex-policeman. And me and Chambo were standing down there and on the side of the grave. All of a sudden, this carper come walking down the grass in full regalia. I think he was an inspector or something. I said, good hell, that's funny. He said, what's funny about it? I say, I heard we was burying you today. I say, and you'll come down here to look at the grave. But we had some laughs doing that, grave digging. A bloody good life that was. When I lived up Schoolfield, there used to be an old boy called Bud Frost lived next door to me. And he was always on about his garden and things like that. And he had a load of flowers, daffodils there once. They looked bloody lovely. And he come round mine, he said, girl, look at your bloody garden, you ain't got the flowers in there. Look at mine, that looked bloody beautiful. Anyway, he went off to Sudbury. While he was gone to Sudbury, I started the mower up and went round the back garden and mowed the bloody lot down. When he come back, I say, look, Bob, your bloody daffodils are all died off. God, hell, he'd say. And there was hell to play, but he took it the right way. But what made me laugh about me and old Bob Frost, when I lived up Schoolfield, I always used to drive in the back entrance. Never used the front entrance of Schoolfield. I always used my back garden. And when we were poaching my old mate one year, every night the gamekeeper used to come up about 5 miles an hour, and he used to get to the top of the lane and turn round and come back down again about 5 miles an hour. Anyway, one particular day, I got a great old bit of plywood, about 4 or 5 foot square, and some white paint, and I put a sign up on this plywood in big letters, "Gone poaching, back later." Anyway, he come creeping by, me and Stoonie were hid up, Frosty was hid up in the garden. He went creeping by, and we heard him turn round at the top, and as he was coming down, we put the bloody sign at the back entrance of the garden, "Gone poaching, back later," and he slowed right down and put his lights on full, and he went off like the bloody wind, yeah. And we used to put that outside. I got a tattoo on my arm that says "Lord Finstead Poacher," because I used to get a lot of our pheasants up Finstead End. And I was in Clacton one day, and I happened to be standing outside the tattoo house in High Street, and there was 3 boys stood there, and they were saying, go on, have you, should I go in and have one? And the other boys say to them, "Nah, they bloody hurt, I shouldn't go in there." Another one said, "I ain't going to have one, they bloody hurt." Anyway, I stood there listening to this, I say, "Go on, you bloody wussies, go in and have one." And they say to me, "Well, where's yours, Grandad?" I said, "I ain't got none." He said, "Well, you go in there one, you dare go in, yeah?" I said, "Yeah, I bet I'll bloody dare." So I went in and sat there. The old boy said, "What do you want to put on there?" And I said, "Lord Finstead," I spelled it so he spelled it right, "Poacher." And I said, "I want a few little organ notes round the outside." He says, "No problem." And I sat there while he was doing it, and these boys kept saying, "Do it hurt?" I said, "Nah, don't bloody hurt." I said, "It's just like somebody pulling a sting and that'll over you." I said, "It ain't hurting at all." Anyway, he done mine in about 10 or 15 minutes, and while I was having mine done, they were looking all through these pictures, and they decided they were going to have one each, and the 3 they were going to have done on their arms each was going to come to about 150, 160 quid. So anyway, they said they wanted these done on their arm, and he'd finished mine. He said, "I'll tell you what, Rodney," he say, "you're a bloody good salesman," he say, "you can have yours for nothing," he say, "but these boys will have to pay full price." And I said, I finished up with that. But going back to organ playing, they want an organist in Hartest. I'm going back a few years now, and they've got 3 or 4 people put in for the job, and I don't know why I put in for it. I think that's because I was friends of Seabrook and that. Anyway, they had a bloke come from somewhere who was going to be like the Simon Carroll organ playing. So everybody had to play a couple of bits of music. Anyway, we played each other, and at the finish, the bloke, Tom Wright, the old parson, say, "If you want the job, Rodney, we'd like you to have the job." And then all of a sudden, something in my head said, "Think about it." So anyway, I said, "Well, can I have a few days to think about it?" He said, "Yes, no problem at all." So anyway, this was the Sunday afternoon. On the Friday, there was a dance at Hartest in the village hall, and they got a bar there, and you know what we were like in the 60s, us boys. We all had a few beers, and things got out of hand, and there was a fight started. And that was about 30 or 40 fighting in the hall, and that went outside into the road and finished up on the green. Anyway, on the Thursday, before the day, I'd already sent a letter saying that after I'd thought about it, I didn't want the job. Anyway, I had a letter come from the Hartest Church Council and Tom Wright the next week, and they said after having a meeting with the Hartest Church Council, and we've considered it, he said, and anyway, an organist is supposed to look after his hands and not get engaged in fisticuffs. Yours, Tom Wright. And that's how I didn't get the job at Hartest anyway. I walked down the farm on the Law Road. This old boy, he had about 30 or 40 cockles given, and they were skinny old things. There weren't no meat on them at all. Couldn't catch them. Anyway, they started eating all his lettuces walking about, and eating half his garden. So he said, I don't know, he said, I've got to get rid of these cockles, he said, but I don't know where to get rid of them, I don't know how to get, I said, well, you've got a great old net, ain't you? He said, yeah. I said, well, let's put the net up and herd them all down this passage and get them in the back of this net. He said, what we're going to do with them then? I said, we've got some sacks, ain't we? He said, yeah. So anyway, we herded these cockles round, we got the bloody lot caught up in this net, and we went and got some sacks, and we were putting the cockles alive in the sacks and tying the tops up. He said, what are you going to do now? I said, we'll put them in the pickup, I'll get rid of them. So we put all the sacks with about 40 cockles in the back of the pickup. I went up fenced end, nobody about, and I let them go. Anyway, about a week later, I went up there on my bicycle, and the woman come out the house. She said, hello, Rodney, how are you? I said, all right. She said, there's something funny going on about here. I said, something funny, boy. She said, I've got a bloody 20 or 30 cockles all rusting in my apple trees, making a hell of a row. She said, I don't know where they come from. She said, I've been up the road and asked everybody. Nobody seemed to know where they come from. She said, I just don't know what to do. But the old fox had bust on them in the end, but that was funny, that was, when you went up there the nights, if you went through there the nights, her apple trees were full of bloody cockles and nobody could understand where they come from. And they all come from the farm on the Barton Road. At one time here, when I was poaching that winter and seeing the old boy in the job centre with the pheasants during the day, I hadn't got much to do during the day. You do a bit of gardening and a bit of decorating, but I used to make gypsy pegs with the old metal round the handles, and I used to go up the hedgerows. I used to go where those deep ditches, because old hazel used to come up dead straight to the light, and I used to cut the hazel down, and I'd sit up there and take the bark off them, so they were white, and then I'd tie them up and bring them home, and I'd got a big old chopping block, and I used to cut them into the lengths of a linen peg, and then I used to put the mantle bands round them in the shed, and then if that was a nice day, I'd go and sit under an old tree somewhere and what we call mouth them out with a knife and turn them out so they thin, and I used to make thousands on them, and I used to go round the houses, round Denston, Hawkington, Wickenbrook, flogging these old gypsy pegs, and used to get somebody, used to knock the door and they said, oh no, we don't use that sort, we don't want them. But I made thousands and thousands and sold thousands. And what I do is, or what I've done as well, if you go round the hedgerows, all round Denston, Fenced End, Wickenbrook, if there's one I'm cutting out and that don't cut out right, instead of me putting it in me, I bring them all back and I drill a hole through the top and I nail them on telegraph posts and trees. And if you goof and heard of Wickenbrook, there's gypsy pegs nailed on trees everywhere. That's how my mind works. There's even pegs on trees as you go out of Colchester towards Clacton. Even in Clacton there's pegs all up the road. And what else I'll do in the shed is I'll get a great old lump of wood and I'll carve a head, proper head with eyes and the mouth, sometimes with a beard, sometimes with the hair, and I'll drill a hole through it and with a big 6-inch nail, and I'll nail them onto great old oak trees. And if you go round up Fenced End, people keep saying it's a bit weird up there. There's all these funny heads up there on trees. That's very spooky. But that's me, and I put them on these trees and these heads everywhere, looking over the road and things like that, all the way round, yeah. And I've been doing that for years. In my house, everything in my house, all the furniture, everything I've bought or everything I got, I've made myself. Because when we were young and been married first, people used to have this old straw board furniture, and my missus is one of they what keep moving the furniture round. You'll have the couch down one end one week, and then you come home, the couch is up the other bloody end the next week. And old straw board furniture upstairs, and that never go back together properly, so I made a stool first, got a bit of oak from somewhere and made a stool, and out of that I sort of got bits of oak out of begged and borrowed out old farmyards and barns and everything I got in the house, clocks, lamps, standard lamps, little lamps, chests. I make them all, huge chairs, and I French polycarve them, French polish them, and everything I've made, I got in the house, everything in the house I made myself, and I've made lots of them for me daughters and me son. They've all got my furniture, and the grandkids have got chests with the names on and everything like that. I'll put, and every piece of furniture, when we used to go poaching years ago and used a 410, we used to take a shell out behind so that didn't lay on the floor of the wood, and every bit of my furniture, you'll know it, has got a 410 shell built into the woodwork as so that everybody know that's mine. And I even make big pegs, which are lucky. And this is a gypsy peg, but that's a big one, was just made for show. And they're lucky, these pegs are, if you touch them. But it don't work for me, it works for everybody else. And yeah, everything I've made myself. So all my furniture, nobody else anywhere has got furniture like I got, because that's all been made by me, to my own design. In the pubs years ago, people used to sing old songs, and some of them were a bit near the mark. Is the old Suffolk one, what they used to say was the sow drinks water by the ton, and after 10 years is done, but ginful, sinful, rum folk men go on for 60 years and 10, and some of them, the mighty few, stay pickled till they're 92. And there used to be people up Wimble Road, all got those Suffolk accents. Old Raya Johnson, she used to have a real old Suffolk accent. My old mother had a real Suffolk accent. A lot of people now wouldn't understood or understand what they say, because that was different, but it's all changed now. There used to be an old thing I used to recite. There was a young lady who walked like a duck, said she had found a new way to bring up the children to sew and to knit, while the boys in the cowshed were shoveling the contents of the cowshed into the mire, while the lord of the manor was pulling his horse from the stable to go on the hunt, while the lady of the manor was powdering her. What did you think I was going to say? You dirty old devils, you were right anyway. When we was rabbing once, we used to work for the Ministry of Agriculture. We were supposed to gas these rabbits along A45, but we never used to gas them all. We used to catch some and flog them. And there used to be an old boy in Ashen. They used to have a couple, and we used to knock the door and say to him, "You want a brace of rabbits, George?" And he used to say the same thing, "Are they fresh?" "I don't want them if they ain't fresh." "Of course they're fresh," say, "Look, see with eyes, look, only caught this morning. I'll have them." And every time we went there and knocked the door, he used the same thing, "Are they fresh?" "Don't want them if they ain't fresh." And one day we went there and knocked the door, "Brace of rabbits, George?" "Yes, I'll have them if they're fresh." And we put them down on the floor in his porch, and they runned up his bloody passage and hid up behind his couch. Say, "I'll get my fresh one, that George." He never asked us no more if they were fresh. He took out to see me. But when I lived up Church Gate with my old man, there was a girl lived next door to me, and she was the same age as me. So when we were young, I used to go round there and play cards or whatever you do in the 50s and that. Anyway, it was a rough night one night. That was a snowing, the bloody wind was blowing, that was cold, and we all used to have them bloody old wooden dunnies down the bottom of the garden. And she say, "Dad, I want to go to the toilet." He say, "Well, there's no need to go down the garden a night like this, do you? You can do it in a pile." She say, "Yeah, but I don't want to do number ones, I want to do number twos." He say, "Well, it don't matter, you can't go down there tonight in this weather." He say, "You can do it in the pile." Anyway, she went out in the back room there and done it in the pile, and the old boy went to the front door, opened the front door and threw it out. Anyway, it weren't about 5 minutes later, there was a knock on the door. and the old man opened the door, and there was a bloke stood there. He say, "You're a dirty lot of buggers live here, ain't you?" And the old boy say to him, "You got room to talk, stand there with shit all over your face." But when I was on Radio Suffolk with an old boy called Fred, when I had none, I said to Fred, I said, "I'm not really 100% Suffolk, you know, Fred." He say, "You ain't." I say, "No." I say, "I'm half German." He say, "You are." I say, "Yeah, well, during the war," I say, "there was a load of German prisoners of war about Glamstead." I say, "And one on them had his wicked way of my mother." I say, "And when he finished, he got off and started to pull his trousers up, and he say to her, 'In 9 months' time, you will have a baby, and it won't be an English bastard.'" I say, my mother got up and pulled the knickers up, and she say to the old boy, she say, she say, "In 9 weeks' time you're going to be covered of bloody spots, and I'll be German measles neither." And there's all these old Suffolk tales about old boy went to Swaffham Market one day, and he bought a new hat, a new pair of boots, and he come home. He walked in the house, and the old woman never said nothing to him about these new boots, never mentioned them. So he thought, "I don't know, that's funny." So he went and sat on the couch, put his feet up on the couch. She still never said nothing, never mentioned anything about these new boots. Anyway, she went to bed, he went upstairs, he got stripped right off, just left his boots on. And he say, "Don't you notice anything different about me?" She say, "No, same old skinny old ribs." She say, "Same old thing hanging there." He say, Yeah, but look where I was pointing." He say, "I was pointing to my new boots." She say, "When you went to Swaffham today, that's a pity you didn't buy a bloody new hat." I had an old boy who talk about a funny tale. I had an old mate, and he got took to Sudbury Court for speeding, and I went with him. Anyway, he stood there in the dark, and the judge said to him, he said, "By the way," he said, "what was the first sign you see on approaching Glamstead?" Thinking he was going to say 30 mile an hour. He said, "What was the first sign you see when you approach Glamstead?" He said, "Tight as £1.50 a bag." And that stopped the whole court. They had the whole court cracked up, and that was the finish. He got fined £5. But I thought that was bloody witty and that was funny. But me and he got drunk one night in Pink's on gin and tonics. We had an old Land Rover with a slide windows, so that had been snowing. Wind was a-blowing, and we went down the hill. They used to have an old Chinese caravan in Clare on the Market Hill called the Bowloon. That was beautiful. He said, "Come on, we'll go to Clare, we'll catch that bloody caravan before that go home tonight, we'll have a chinky takeaway." And as we went out of Cowdenish down the hill, near Houghton Hall, there were 2 carpers stood there in a squad car, and one of them come out in the road, on the side of the road, and waved his torch to wave us down. I said to my mate, I said, "That's the bloody finish now." I say, he said, "It ain't worth me getting out the Land Rover, is he?" So anyway, he pulled up. There was about 6 inches of snow. Put the window down, the carpenter went to come across the road, never word with him, and he slipped on the ice on the road in the snow, and he went right up in the air and banged himself right down on the road, and my mate shouted out the window, "Bloody pest, ain't you?" to this carper. And his mate rushed into the road and picked his mate up and brushed him down. He said, "No, but we've got reason to believe you 2 buggers are." And he come across and he breathalyzed my mate, and that didn't even show on the breathalyzer. He reckoned when he hit the deck, that smashed the machine. So all as I could say was, "Carry on, boys, enjoy your evening." So he got away with that. When we used to knock about old Richard Seabrook, he had another old boy work for him called Ivan Beavis, and he said to me and Beavis one morning, "Got a job for you 2 boys today." And he lived in the farmhouse above Chudge Hill. He said, "I want you to take this sow and a boar," he said, "along Scotchy Bridge and along to Couple." We got to take it up here. It was a lovely morning. He said, that's early, there won't be much traffic about. Anyway, me and Beavers got the sow and the boar, and we walked off down the road with him. Scotchy Bridge, got halfway along the bloody wood, and the old boar started to get a bit amorous. Well, before you know what happened, the boar was on top of the sow, right in the middle of the bloody road, and he couldn't get off. All of a sudden, there was a huge big double-decker come along, and we could see the sign on the front, Long Melford W.I. out in DeBerry. Beavers say, what the hell are we going to do? I say, I know what I'm going to do, I'm getting in that bloody wood. So I runned in through the hedge, so had he. Anyway, I don't think they see us on the bus, and of course they come along here, and there was a boar, all frothed at the mouth, on top of the whole sow. And you never heard nothing like it in this bloody bus. And the bus driver got out, he was a saying, I don't know how they got here. He said, ain't nobody here looking after them, they must have escaped from the bloody field. And anyway, the boar got off in the end, and they walked across to the bank, the boar and the sow started to eat the grass, and the old bus driver got back in the bus, and off he went, and these women were a-hollering and a-laughing and shouting, and how that went round the corner, me and Beavers crept out the bloody hedge again. But when I was playing football for Glamsford one day, we was playing against Bows and Pools up at Glamsford, and the Glamsford pitch always used to get muddy in the winter, that wouldn't drain like some pitches used to. So down in the Barton Goldmouth, that used to be full of mud. Anyway, we had a free kick one day, just on the halfway line, and I put the ball down for the free kick, and the Belgium defence sort of shuffled back to the penalty area and got lined up, and the referee turned to me and blew the whistle, and he turned his back on me and started to run towards the penalty area, and I picked the ball up with my hands and kicked it like a goalkeeper, and it went right over the top of the Belgian defence, and they was all shouting, ref, ref, he's picked the bloody ball up, he picked it up. And the ball, if that had been dry, it had bounced and went over the goalkeeper's head, but being wet, had hit the mud and stopped dead, rolled in the mud, and the referee stopped the game, and he come across to the linesman, and he said to the linesman, what happened, linesman? He said, I don't know, I was lighting a fag. We went to Lanham once, and Lanham come to Glamsford. Got the fixtures muddled up, so we finished up in Bradfield Manger playing them at darts. I had a relation called Ernie, still about. He lived up north somewhere, anyway. His stepbrother, my missus. And he phoned up one Thursday, it was a Good Friday, he says, all right, if I come down for the weekend, he say, and stay, the missus say, yeah, come and stay the night, he say, and you can have Sunday dinner. So anyway, he said, it'll be lovely. So anyway, got an extra bit of meat in for the roast, and all ready for the thingy. On the Saturday night, Easter Saturday tea time, we used to have a service at Kemley's Church, so I told Ernie, the missus told him that Rodney will most probably be, he'll be down to church tea time, but he'll be in the barrels about 7:30. He said, I'll meet him here. Went and played for the service, come out the service. Ernie was standing outside with this bloody dog with a pink ribbon in his hair. I said, Ernie, you're going to have to put that dog in the car. He said, what was that? I said, he ain't come and stand in Kemley's barrels with a dog with a pink ribbon in his head. You know, he put the dog in the car. We went in the barrels. My mate Chambo had arrived at this time. We got on the booze on the Guinness. Ernie had 3 or 4 pints of Guinness, that's what he did. Anyway, all of a sudden, Ernie disappeared, never noticed. I said to the landlord, I said, well, what happened to Ernie? He said, I don't know, he went to the toilet. I went and looked at the toilet, he'd gone, he weren't here. So I thought, well, he's nipped home. Anyway, I come home late that night, about 12:01 in the morning. Missus was here. She said, where's Ernie? I said, I don't know, he's in bed, isn't he? She said, no, I ain't seen him. She said, you've done something to her? I said, I ain't done nothing to him. She said, you have. Anyway, Sunday morning, no bloody Ernie. Sunday night, ate dinner. No, she kept saying, you've done something to him. You've definitely done something to Ernie. And that was the Monday tea time, the Easter Monday tea time. He phoned up and he say, Mrs. say, where are you? He said, I'm back home in London. She said, well, you've got to stop course. He said, I ain't coming down no more. He said, I couldn't stick day too. He said, I felt so bad, he said. I went up the road, slept in the car, he said, and I've gone right back to London. And that's the last we see of Ernie, that night in London. We ain't seen him no more since, and that must be 10 or 15 years ago since we seen her relation. So Ernie didn't stick the pace. And there was an old boy took a shop down Brook Street opposite Glamsford Crown. He was one of the first Londoners ever to move into Glamsford. And he had this shop. And how he got the name Shark Smith was he used to have a mobile van. He used to go round Hawken and Danston. And one day somebody said to him in the Crown, what's trade like, Smithy? God, he said, trade's shocking terrible. He said, I've been all the way from Hawkey Town to Kitten Green. He said, I ain't sold a box of matches. He said, blokes stood on Hawken Green big enough to turn the bloody van over. Never even bought a box of matches. Trade's shocking. So ever out of that, he got the name Shark Smith in Glamsford, because they used to give people nicknames in them days. Anyway, I was in the shop one morning and there was a bloke come in there who stuttered. And Smithy stood there with his white coat on, and the bloke, he said, next. And the bloke said, I'll have a quarter. Smithy said, hold on a minute. He said, you'll have to slow down. I can't keep up with the bloody order. That was Shark Smith for you. And yeah, he weren't long before they shut the shop. But when I went to school at Clare, what used to sit beside an old boy called Will Farrens, what lived in Glamsford. He's still about. We used to be on the co-op boats together. Anyway, we went up Church Gate one day and there was a television man in this row of terraces. You could hear him talking. And what we was going to do is, you remember that years ago they used to put nails in the wall to train plants up. Well, what we done was we had a huge bit of cat elastic and we tied the cat elastic round the nail, pulled it across the door, twisted it round the doorknob where the television man was in the house, and there used to be an old boy lived next door in the next terrace called old Ken Plum. He's rare fiery. And we put this bit of cat elastic across and tied it on the nail the other side. I thought we was going to leave it like that, but my mate went and knocked the bloody door, didn't he? Plummy's door, and he shouted, whoa, Plummy! And we ran across the road and hid in the bushes near the pond up Church Gate. All of a sudden, the door opened, and this bloke Plum come flying out the door, and the cat elastic caught him round the neck. He come out the door about a yard, and when that went tight, I'd throw him right back in the bloody house again. And you could hear the vases busting on the bloody sideboard inside of the door. By the time this had happened, the swearing and the breaking, who should come round the corner just as it happened was an old boy called Hooky Wells on his bicycle coming home from work. He say, what's happened, Ken? What's happened? He said, oh, bloody near hung me fucking self. And we was in the bushes. I started laughing, I couldn't help it. And Hooky was a fit man for his age. He used to win the pensioners race every year up the flower show, the 100 yards. Oh yeah, I can, they're over there behind the bloody hedge. And he come running across there, and me and Wilf started to run down Bell's Lane, and we were young and fit as well. And we went down there and we got nearly 3/4 of the way down the lane before we shook him off. That's how fit he was. But I should never forget that. What's happened, Ken? What's happened? He said, fucking near bloody killed me fucking self. And yeah, that was funny, that was, putting that bit of cat elastic across there. But we used to make catapults, and we used to go and get acorns, and we used to go round the houses. And we were so good at shooting these catapults, we used to let them go near enough at the same time. So that was like somebody knocking the house door. People used to come to the door and look round because there wasn't nobody there. We'd put the acorns and shot them at the front doors of these catapults. And they were good old days, they were, yeah. I ain't allowed on Radio Suffolk no more. Things got a bit out of hand, about the tiles and things like that. But I went on there and told them about Hawkenden one day, and they were talking about the village of Hawkenden, and they was on about, so I phoned up for this one, but I didn't tell him my name. I told him I was Dave from Hawkenden, and he said, "Oh, you live in Hawkenden?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Is the pub still open?" I said, "Yeah, it's a wonderful pub." I said, "It's bloody full weekends. You want to get up there and try it one day?" I said, "I got a leisure centre up in Hawkenden now." He said, "Leisure centre?" He said, "What, in Village of Hawkenden?" I said, "Yes." I say they got an old sheep was tied up to the pub sign out the front. I say they used to have a cow at one time, but all the customers would complain because that was too far to go round to kiss them. Anyway, I say, that's a funny place, Hawkenden now. I say, the pigeons there now, they all fly upside down. He say, "They do, what's that?" I say, "There ain't enough rough shitting on up there now." I say, "So the pigeons come by and you notice them." I say, "They're all upside down." I say, "You'll never find anybody in Hawkenden with an A level or anything like that." I say, "They're all interbred up here." I said, "And you can always tell a Hawkenden wedding." He say, "What's that?" I say, "Well, they're all sitting the same side of the church." I say, "That's what the village is like," I say. And I say, "By the way," I say, "that was never known as Hawkenden when I was a boy. That was always known as Hawden. That was always known as Hawden. But everybody's got posh up there." I say, "You ain't allowed in the pub now unless you've got a 4-wheel drive Jeep, Land Rover," I say, "and you must have mud on the side," I say, "and you must have a pair of Wellingtons which are green, and they must have a buckle on the side." I said, "You can't go in and have a pair of wellies," I say, "with turnips down or anything like that." I said, "You tell you about turnips," I say. "There used to be an old boy up at Couple, they had about 30,000 chickens up there." I say, "And when we was working up there in the building, we used to go down there every night in the van," I say, "and park on the concrete hard standing, which was about 500 yards away, and we used to creep across to the chicken place and open the front door, and all the chickens used to run towards you." And I say, "And as quick as they run towards you, used to wring your necks and put them in the sack and bring them up to Gramphone and sell them for 5 bob each." I say, "That was a good little earner." I say, "And one night we were going up there poaching," I say, "and I got a pair of black Wellingtons with the turnips down, covered the tarmac. The old boy had died next door to me, and his old woman gave me the Wellingtons." I say, "And we was going up there, and they'd got a caravan, and they'd just got this bloke working up there, looking after the chickens in the garden." And I say, he used to walk from the caravan to the chicken shed with this new pair of Wellingtons on, and when he got to the chicken shed, he'd take his Wellingtons off, put his low shoes on, and go in the chicken sheds because they were all wood chips and things like that." I say, "Well, anyway, going up there one night, all of a sudden, the caravan door opened, so we got in the hedge, and he went walking across, put his low shoes on, and went to the chicken huts." And I said to my mate, I say, "Hold my gun." He said, "What are you going to do?" I say, "You watch." And I walked across up the track and across to the chicken thing, thinking, hoping he will come out the door anyway, which he didn't. And I took my Wellingtons off, what were covered with tarmac and turnips, put his brand new ones on, which fitted me like a glove, and walked back to the hedge. He said, "Jesus Christ," he said, you'll get hear something about this." Anyway, we stood there watching, and the old boy come out the shed. He took one shoe off, and he got this Wellington, and he put it up, pulled it up on his foot, and he looked at it, and he stopped for a second, and he took the other shoe off and put the other Wellington on, and he ran back to the caravan, and we never did hear no more about this when we was up there. And next day, when we see him, he'd been somewhere, and he'd got another pair of Wellingtons, so I don't know what happened to mine. Yeah, I'll just finish up by telling you how times have changed. There used to be an old boy getting the Prince of Wales named Herbert Johnson. And like people years ago, they hardly ever went out the village apart. They might get to Sudbury, or they might have got on the bike and went to the next village down the road. But Herbert had never been out the village in his life. And he used to come in the Prince of Wales every night at 10 to 9, never 5 to 9, 8:45 to 9, 10 to 9. And he come in one night and there was a bloke in there and got talking to Herbert. And he say, "Where you been today, Herbert?" He say, "Nowhere, must have been in the back garden." He say, "Oh, I thought you'd have went to Barry or somewhere." He say, "I've never been to Barry." So he say, "I'm going to London tomorrow, Herbert, do you want to have a ride?" "Cool. What, London?" He say, "Yeah." He say, "I'm going tomorrow, you can come with me, come for a ride." He say, "Yeah, I'll come, I've never been anywhere like that." Anyway, they went off to London. And the next, that night, when they got back, Herbert come in at 10 to 9. They hadn't been back long. He was sweating. Got his hanky, rubbing his head. So, somebody in the pub said, "Whatever's the matter, Herbert?" "God," he say, "I've been to London today." They say, "You have, Herbert?" He say, "Yeah." He say, "I never know nothing like it." He say, "I never seen so many people." He say, "Traffic." He say, "I've never seen nothing like it." So some old boy say, "What's the day, Herbert?" He say, "It's Thursday." "Why?" He say, "It's market day in London, Thursday's." "God, hell," he say, "I don't want to go up there no more on market day." And he never realised what London was like for traffic and for people. And that's how times have changed. Yeah. You talk about old things years ago and old names and things like they got today, what they don't use no more. I remember when I lived up Churchgate up at Gramphone there was an old boy moved in. He come from London, a couple of doors away from me, and he was sort of trying to be a country boy. And for his birthday, they bought him a bird book. Anyway, I was out front one day and he got this bird book. He said, "Cool, I had this bird book bought me." I say, "You have?" He say, "Yeah." Anyway, he stood there looking at it, and there was this old bird singing on the tree in the garden. He say, "What's that?" And I, cause I'd been in Suffolk, I say, "Oh, it's a mavis." "Oh," he say. Anyway, I see him again about 2 days later. He say, "This old bird book I got bought," he say, "ain't it bloody good?" I say, "What do you mean, ain't it good?" He say, "Well, I sat at home for a bloody hour looking through the index at the back." He say, "I can't see a bloody bud in there called a mavis." I say, "I'm sorry, boy, I was talking Suffolk to you." I say, "That's the thrush." So then, of course, when I give him a proper name, he could find it. But he'd been sitting there, reckon the book weren't good because he couldn't find a mavis. That's like we used to call an old heron, an old hanser. They used to call a heron a hanser years ago, and we used to call a scarecrow a merkin. And used to say, "Good, there's no merkin in that field out there." And people used to say, "Merkin? What the bloody hell is a merkin?" And this old goldfinch was called the King Harry, and we used to call the duck a diddles, and the old owl was called the gillyhooter. My old mother used to say, "Cool, you can't half hear the old gillyhooter tonight," when that was up in the tree. Well, if you were to say to somebody today, "Cool, the old gillyhooter was going to head last night," they wouldn't know what the hell you were talking about. And people years ago, I sometimes still say it, as the parish lantern, the moon up in the sky. They never used to say the moon, they used to call it the parish lantern and things like that. That's like an old boy up Churchgate when I was a young kid there and they first put the street lights up. He say to my old chap, he say, "I see a funny thing down the street last night, Bill." He say, "What's that?" He say, "I see a light in a bottle." My old chap say, "Light in a bottle? Whatever you want about, you mean a candle in a bottle?" He say, "No, he's a light in a bottle down there on top of a post." And they went and looked at it and asked somebody, because they'd started putting street lights up and things like that. And they didn't know what it was. Like an old hare, we used to call an old hare a Sally. And all these old names, like a blackbird, a magpie, you should always salute. I do. Every time I see a magpie, I salute it. They all reckon that's bad luck not to salute a magpie when you see it. And it's the old tale, ain't it? 1 for sorrow, 2 for joy, 3 for girl, 4 for boy, 5 for silver, 6 for gold, 7 for a secret never to be told, magpie. And there's all these old names. And yeah, then there's the old snail was called the Hudmadud. You don't hear nobody use them now. They're all gone, just like that tale I told you about old Herbert. People like her gone. They don't use it no more. There ain't nobody now talk posh like I do. There ain't many. They're all gone. They're all under the bloody turf. Yeah? So I hope there's a few more out about somewhere what keep it going. Yeah, well, to finish up together, I'd like to tell you I've had a wonderful life. I had a wonderful childhood. I've never took life serious. We've always had a bit of a laugh. We've always gone out to have a bit of laugh. I married a wonderful wife. Been married 40 years. And I've had a lovely life. And kids today will never have the life what we old boys had in the 50s and the 60s. And that's never be the same.
Rodney Bullock has been organist at St Mary's for 26 years, and he has a reputation for coming up with a rather unusual line in voluntaries on odd occasions. And he's often to be found sitting on the green here with his pal Don Angel, who's been in the choir a year or two, haven't you, Don?
Yes, 76 years.
76 years.
Yes.
From boy soprano to what?
Yes, boy soprano to alto and tenor.
Now, what about these unusual voluntaries? What's the most unusual one you've come up with?
Well, I've come up with everything from the 20s, 30s and the 40s. I'd play anything. Mike and Whoopi, Georgia, old jazz numbers by Hoagie Carmichael, even right up to the present day the Beatles.
In the middle of a church service, and one of them in particular in the middle of a Lent service, wasn't it?
Yeah. I was playing a voluntary called Mike and Whoopi. And Don started singing behind me in the vestry, and the bloke come out and told him off. He said, I don't think that's right to make Whoopi in Lent, Don. You should wait till Easter.
Correct, that's correct, yes. One day, there was one period when we had the coach of parents and associates come, and they couldn't get in the church, could the road, because the parson hadn't arrived.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the old boy come up to the organ, he'd say, you can play the bridal march now, the bride is ready to come in. I'd say, you seen the parson? He'd say, no. I'd say, nor have I. I'd say, I reckon he's here, go and have a look in the vestry. He weren't there, so I'd say, you better come along and then we'll go and find him. Went down to the rectory, and the parson was on holiday, but lucky enough, there was a standing bloke there, and he come to the door with his Wellingtons on. He said, well, keep my bride at the gate for 5 minutes, he's saying, I'll be there as quick as I can. So he come back. When I got back in the church porch to tell the bride she got away, she was in tears. So I struck up with her, was I waiting at the church.
So apart from the fact that you love a good sing-song, what is it about the church here that keeps you wanting to be part of it?
I couldn't come down here every Sunday for 26 years if I didn't think there was something up here.
No.
Oh yeah, if that was just a routine there, I wouldn't come. I'd stop at home, yeah.
But what do you think about the Church of England music? Is it lively enough, or do you think you need to give it a helping hand?
Yeah, I think today you've got to give it a helping hand. I mean,
Yes.
that's a job to get young kids in church today. They ain't going to come in church to sing psalms and Te-Deums and some of these. They're singing things what's been written about 400 years. That's why, you know, I like hymns like Lord of the Dance or Give Me Joy and things like that. At least that liven the old place up. Get everybody going.